Yeah, well, I'm super excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. Hey, everybody, and welcome. We're joined here with Chris from Resend. I'm really excited to have him on. We have a lot of cool things to talk about. He's a developer experience engineer. But instead of me introducing Chris, why don't I just have you introduce yourself? Because I think it'll be more entertaining for the viewers. So, welcome, Chris, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. It's great to chat with you again. Yeah, my name is Chris Pennington. I'm a DX engineer for Resend, and it's my joy to kind of get to focus on everything that touches developers who interact with our product. So whether that's giving product feedback, to writing documentation, to doing hopefully like actually useful social content, which is what we try to do. Yeah, my job is to try to help it. Both the onboarding and then the actual experience of using Resend really easy. And I've been there for about a year and a half, and I just love the team. It's like this super cool combination of really smart people who are also super humble. And that's a hard combo to find. So when you find it, you stick with it. And yeah, I just really enjoy being at Resend. And thanks so much for having me on today.
Oh no, that's awesome. And I guess just to learn a little bit more about you, how did you get interested in tech and what you got excited like on this whole journey?
Yeah, I came to it kind of late in life, I suppose. But yeah, I started working in docs like 8 to 9 years ago now. And it was a non-technical product, but really enjoyed the experience of teaching, and I very much view myself as like an educator, just in the way I think through stuff. And so then I started coding and just fell in love with it. I remember I had my brother, who's actually a web developer, told me, like, you're either going to get bit and you're going to love it and you won't be able to do anything else but think about coding, or you won't and it'll be frustrating. And I called him up 3 months later and said, I'm bit. I cannot stop thinking about development. So I started, I don't know, that was 2020, and started just coding every second I possibly had. Started a YouTube channel, not to tell anyone, but just I kind of had to talk through stuff. And that kind of took off and led one thing to the next. And then I ended up at Resend. And so to get to now service developers as they work with our products is kind of a special way to combine the education, the doc side of my background, and like this real drive for understanding how developers think and how to assist them the best. So yeah, it's been a short little time in that sense, but really enjoyed the experience. And to be at Resend is just a dream.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you have this knack of explaining topics like really well to beginners, because I did take your Astro course, which is amazing, by
Yeah.
the way. Oh, nobody,
Well,
if you
thanks.
want to learn and do it, that's definitely the way to go. But I could tell that you have that passion for teaching and explaining things. I think I love seeing that in like developers that not only excited and obsessed about building things, but love sharing that stuff with the community. And I guess that makes perfect sense, why you do what you do. And I wanted to follow up like that, I guess. Why does developer experience matter in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's like every developer knows from a personal level the things that matter to them. But I think as a dev tools company, like we realize that people have limited time. I think there's kind of this lazy take that people are lazy and they just don't want to read. They don't want to read your docs and that kind of stuff. But it's really not that. It's that people are busy and there's a lot going on in people's lives, and you have to earn their right to give you their attention. And so developer experience matters because people's time matters, and their experience with your product ultimately determines whether or not they use it. So I think a lot of times you can think about it in a couple different slices, but kind of the one we start with is like time to like first act. You have like time to first paint in the browser. Like the idea is like when I touch a product, I want to be able to do something with that product in the first few seconds. And so like our onboarding is very much geared that way. Like you can very quickly click API key, click a button, and it sends you an email. And you're like, okay, that was cool. Like I understand how that all works. And that time to first act tells the developer, we're not going to waste your time. Like we're going to give you what you need when you need it at the right time. And so ultimately it matters because people's time matters, and companies want to trust somebody who's cared about those small little details. So paying attention to details, everything from design, which I think traditionally we thought developers didn't care about, but it signals something. It signals that people care about you, care about your time, to the way docs are structured, how quick it is to understand and kind of grok a surface product area. And then like time to debug a lot of times too. Like part of developer experience is when things go poorly, are they there for you? Like, are they ready to jump into the trenches with you? Do they give you good error messages? Are you able to quickly act on those messages? So a lot of that is tied up in developer experience, but ultimately it matters because people's time matters. And so, yeah, that's what we try to do, is try to respect people and operate in a way that we would want. And it's nice being a developer building a dev tools company, because you are your own ideal customer.
Yeah.
And so you're trying to think, what would I want? This frustrates me, this annoys me. And so that's kind of the mindset we try to take, as a way to respect people's time, as a way to respect people, and as a way to kind of build the thing that we would really be proud to use ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I totally see that. And actually, like, if folks didn't try Resend, definitely jump in and give it a try. You do have a provider for Strapi, and like, I was actually surprised how many steps there were to get started. There's like two. It's
Mm.
like, especially for Strapi, install the provider, get the API key, and then you're ready to go. It's like, I was like, okay, that was pretty easy. Now I could like start building and exploring things, which is kind of awesome. I think that is very important, like, to take people's time into consideration, especially I
Yeah.
think with all this like noise that we see on social, and there's so much stuff grabbing at your attention that you're just like, I just want to do the thing as quickly as possible with least amount of friction. So it's like a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And something you mentioned before we jumped on the call, you talked about DX, but you also mentioned the term AX. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, agent experience. And I think whether or not that's like an industry-wide term or not, it's, I think, something that immediately resonates with people, like, okay, yeah, I get that. And there's obviously different ways to think about AX. Like, there's just the agent doing it itself, but there's also like the developer kind of wielding the agent. And is that an easy process? And as many people are moving towards more agentic development flows, whether that's like vibe coders, or honestly like genuine devs who are just like, hey, if my agent can figure this out quickly, like, that saves me time. Again, it gets back to respecting the actual person behind the code. And if it can understand the kind of the surface area of your product, give me good suggestions, it's giving me best practices. If it can give me like the expert knowledge you have internally, like, as much as I like email and our company loves to build this platform, I realize most devs don't want to, nor should they care about email. Like, you really just want it to work and stay out of your way. And with a lot of dev tools, like, the best compliment you can get is, oh, I never have to think about you all. Like, it just works. And so that ultimately today means that you have a really good like perspective on how an agent is going to interact. That has everything to do with access. Like, how do they actually access your docs? How do they access information about your product? Are they suggesting you when you ask ChatGPT or whatever else, like, what should I use for email? It has to do with accessibility. Can it actually interact with your product? Are things strapped down on the like are they strapped down in the interface that you can't really access via API? Is there good tooling around it, whether that's MCP or CLIs or agent skills? Like, all these things basically give you as a developer more power, because it gives your agent more power. And so we've been really doubling down. In fact, today we just released an agents page at
Yeah, I saw that. It's pretty
resend.com/agents.
cool.
Yeah, with a bunch of tie-ins to all the things we're doing. And this week has been a huge push to make sure that we're super accessible and easy to interact with for your agent. And again, that can both be like independent agent interaction, or it can be you wielding the agent on your behalf, which is how I think a lot of us are using agents. So realizing that like good AX is good DX. And if you have a bad agent experience, it just wastes the developer's time. They don't think like, oh, these people we're not trying to be AI forward to be AI forward. We're trying to be AI accessible, because this is how people are developing today. And so we want to be there. Ultimately, like, the best agent resend, resend for agents is Resend. But we have to build that in there. So that's how we're thinking about it, and trying to make sure we're being intelligent and smart about the way we go about it, and not just do stuff for the sake of clickbait, but really try to make it a good experience for agents.
It's crazy, because if we had this conversation 3-4 years ago, like, this wouldn't even be like a thing, like,
Yeah.
making experience for our agents to interact on our behalf with like the things we're building. And that's like so wild. So now it's not enough just to have the docs, but it's like, are your docs accessible to agents to make sense and help developers to be productive? And you mentioned skills. I do have an interesting follow-up questions on skills. It's something that we're working on Strapi as well. But I feel like, how do you decide what is a worthwhile skill to make? Like, what is the thought process behind that? Because I feel like you could just make skills for the sake of skills. But like you said, we don't want to waste people's time. So what would be like, like, what was the framework that you guys used to kind of help you decide that?
Yeah, it's definitely got to be something that's useful in the end. Obviously, that's the easiest metric. I just wrote a post a couple of weeks ago on how we built like a DevTools agent skill, and so that captures a lot of my thinking. That's at our blog, and we But I think the fundamental thing is understanding where skills fit in kind of the broader AI landscape. Skills are a way to package up expert knowledge. So a lot of times I've seen skills that are just like retelling the basics about how to use your platform. And honestly, it's a waste of tokens to do that. Like the whole point of a lot of these agents is it can quickly grok that if your docs are accessible, et cetera. But there's a lot of expert knowledge things that, like, even as somebody scanning the docs, I wouldn't know that this is always pretty important. For instance, when I'm sending an email with Resend, I want to make sure I use a special custom header that's set to a unique value when I'm sending transactional like login emails. The reason I want to do that is because if you don't do that, they will thread with the last emails you sent that person. So I want it to not be threaded. Well, you can read our docs and figure that out, but that's probably not something an agent is immediately going to pull out. So that would be something that would be worth packaging in a skill. Another example would be idempotency. When you have things like an email and you retry with logic when it fails, you want to guarantee that you're not going to send double emails. And so you can attach an idempotency key that then basically identifies that send. And before it tries again, it checks to see, has this exact email with the exact same payload already been sent? So again, that's kind of another expert knowledge thing. And there's a lot around the email space. There'd be a lot around a CMS space where you're saying, okay, like you could read our docs and read this, but not understand the importance of it. So that's really what we've tried to do in our skills, our email skills, is say, like, can we package up the opinionated way to do something? And, like when we used to work in offices and talk to each other, that's exactly what you got from like a senior dev. And, obviously we still get that in companies today, where a senior dev can come along and say, you didn't do anything wrong, but like, there's a super opinionated way that we should architect this. That's what a skill's there for. It's to give opinion. And so what we've tried to do is to build our skills in a way that give real opinions on how to use stuff. Obviously, it can include some of the basics, but it should be opinionated, or it's probably not worth being a skill.
And I think that's a very good point. It's like you said, create something that shares like a very opinionated framework of how Resend does things a certain way, or like how we do things like at Strappy. So that way, people are able to save time, point to the skill, let the agent use it, and get exactly, what you need to get done, which is kind of cool. And I guess like with that, we talked about skills. You talked about building like DX, just not for humans, but also for agents. I guess I want to follow up, like, what lessons have you learned like from Resend working there and all these different things, and how the ecosystem changing, that you kind of be like, oh man, this is pretty cool?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of kind of in my role in particular, it's been a lot of keeping my ear to the ground and hearing what's going on and trying to make sure we're responsive to it, while also not just jumping on the bandwagon for stuff. Like we could have just chucked out a skill, but really say like, okay, how should we architect this? Where does it fit? Like, why is it important? Those are the kinds of questions we've needed to ask. I think overall, a lot of the stuff I've learned at Resend has been from the people and the way they think. We have a lot of people who think very deeply about stuff, and I think that's super inspirational. One of our founding design engineer, his name is Ze, and I've always loved, every time we're at offsites, I love his sessions the best, because he takes a problem and he just spins it in a way that I'm like, I've never even thought about it that way. And so I think there's a real value in slowing down and asking good questions. Oftentimes we act first, and then we realize like, oh, we actually were solving the wrong issue in the first place. So we just optimized a bad flow, which felt proficient at the, really like productive at the time. But we ultimately, that's anti-productive. Like we did the wrong thing. We got, farther along in the wrong direction. And so I think a lot of times, like the things we've learned is like keeping my ear to the ground and then asking fundamental questions. So like, what assumptions lie behind what everyone is saying right now? What are things that people are taking for granted? Like, is that what we're trying to accomplish? Does the actual action meet the motive that we have? So I think a lot of it is like in a world of speed right now, with everything going faster and faster. I mean, in 2 months, I couldn't even describe the changes that I've experienced in 2 months, as a lot of us have. But it's like in that speed, it's almost more important to slow down. And I feel like there's several people who are really key at Resend who are really good at that, who slow down and ask the important questions and then move fast. And so, yeah, I think those are maybe more general to life questions, but I think in an age of speed, a lot of those things really come to bear, and your quality either shows or doesn't because of that.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming a rarity to actually slow down, because everything is so instant gratification with all these different tools you have, and people just want to move fast. And I feel like it's becoming a challenge even for me in my day to day. It's like, how much of my reliance do I do on the tools, and how much I sit with the problem like by myself, and how and how to manage that, because a lot of times at work you just want to deliver, meet goals, and sometimes solving the deeper problems and taking time, you kind of always want to find the easier way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like in this like new shift in AI era, like I guess from like your perspective and also what you're doing at Resend, how are you using these AI tools? How do you find that balance? And maybe start there and then get some more thoughts on AI in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a huge topic, not only because everyone's talking about it, but because it touches all of our lives so much. I think maybe let me talk about this in a couple of different ways. Let's talk about first just like how we look at it from the outside, and then maybe I'll talk about the inside if that works. But yeah, as far as like the outside, I think we're trying to ask the questions like, how can we make the time to first act quick for everyone, and that includes agents and it includes developers who often are wielding those agents, but sometimes have the agents doing stuff on their own. That takes experimentation ourselves. You can't guess at that. You have to actually go through the flow. So one thing we always have our new employees do every time we have somebody join, they do a full friction log where they walk through everything they did to get started with the product. And just watching them say like, I couldn't find this button, even though it was in the interface, but it wasn't quite as prominent. Or, I tried to set my agent up with an inbox and here's how it went. Hearing those kinds of details is really important firsthand. And like almost every time we hear those, we all cringe at like, oh, that should be better. This flow should be better. But facing those product things from a real customer, in this case, new employees, but or listening on socials or listening to our success team as they interact. Like I think that's probably the real key thing. You have gold if you have people giving you feedback. And if you don't have it externally, you can kind of create that internally by having these kind of real full in-depth friction logs where they say, this didn't make sense. I didn't understand where this worked. Well, how does this fit with this? And so those are the kinds of things I think we try to think of from the outside. It's like, how can we make that time to first interaction quick? And then when it comes to debugging, how can we make that very quick? And then the last thing would be maybe time to understanding like the surface area of the product. Do they understand quickly? Like there's transactional and there's marketing, and here's the tools that kind of interact with both. So a lot of those like things you have to get from real experience. You can't guess at that. And so whether you do that experience yourself or whether you pull that in from the outside, and ideally you should be doing both. I think that's how we kind of think about the whole agent and dev experience when it comes to kind of building a dev tools company. And I can talk more about how we're using AI internally in a second. But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts about that or any other questions about that.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think what the key point that you said is to really test out the agents before like jumping in the adaptation, both from building and using, because I think one of the things I find is especially something that I don't know if I'm sure you did, like OpenClaw, and how people get excited and they give this unfettered access to their machine to do whatever, and then you'll get like crazy stories. It sent a bill $1,000, blah blah. It's just to me like I love the fact that we have agents and skills and all these things we could do to be more productive. But then the other part of me, it's like, do people kind of audit the things that they use before they use them, or do they just like, oh, my friend said this is awesome, so let me try it? And so before I guess talking about how you internally use these tools, like do you think about like the security implication, or just like any thought on yes, we are more productive, but what are some counterpoints that may come with like the fact that we're so reliant on these tools?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times it comes down to like what you mentioned, which is actually using them. And so a lot of that for most of us has started privately first. Reason actually gives us like basically unlimited AI stuff with Claude, and I also have Cursor. And it's just like, hey, let's right now just experiment. And we're not going to, there's obviously some security practices that we do as well. But I think once you start to use things yourself, so for instance, I set up an OpenClaw and like an EC2 and started playing with that, and like, okay, this makes sense. How are people using this? How can I use this? What are examples I have? It's a lot of like what you do with normal dev stuff. Like I think if you approach it like a normal dev, you're going to say like, okay, well, what are the security things? Like, have I scoped access? How do I get this thing to perform actions on my behalf? Like a lot of the interactions, I think you learn by experience. Just like when you learn a new framework, you pick it up and you start to read the docs and say like, oh, could I do this? Or what about that? And Like those are the things you have to do by doing. And so I think a lot of us started internally, like doing that kind of stuff. And then we've run up against security things like, okay, we need to be careful with this. And so once we brought it in house, I think we've kind of brought our collective interaction with AI to bear on it. And I'm sure like a lot of companies will continue to refine that as we go. But I think probably the first step, I guess, is just internally or like personally using it before we've started internally using it. And so that's kind of guided, I think, the way we've used it internally because we've all had experiences using certain tools, deciding at what points we want to like, rely on this tool and not. So for instance, we might have it put a PR in, but I know some companies are doing this. We always review like everything manually, even though I know some companies just let AI do that. We also have AI reviewers, a couple rounds of that. And so I think for us, like, obviously you don't want to get dependent in a way where you can't think anymore. But if you're asking careful questions, you're using this personally, understanding the implications of it personally, that kind of gives you some guardrails when you bring it into a company to be able to then use it in an intelligent way that like is the way real users use it. So those are a couple thoughts around like security, how to kind of understand how to use stuff within a company. I think, like I said, using it personally first, and a couple of more kind of, I guess, tangential items as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that a lot of this stuff is interesting to viewers in general because AI is just such a big topic, and there's definitely like sides of extreme where just automate everything. You just tell your agent what to do, don't even worry, you'll figure it out. And then to me, I side more on the side of like you want to have like human in the loop. Like you have
Yeah,
some automation, but then you have this review process, and we're able to do certain things. And one of the things, like to me, and this I'll be curious, like how your devs use the tools internally, because one of the things that I learn, like when I talk to different people, no company that I talk to at least has a standard on this is the protocol, this is how you do it. It's like what they do instead is they just, like your company does, they provide these resources. You have this subscription to all these different AIs, and you decide how you use it in your own personal workflow in a sense that it works best for you. Is that similar, like what you see like at your company, how developers use it? Or do you have like a standardized practice, like when you're coding, this is the environment you use, this is the model you use? Or
sure. Yeah, no, I think we're a little bit more open, and some of that is, I think right now you'd probably be, I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but it seems like you might be a little short-sighted to scope it too early because there's just so much changing right now. I
yeah,
think a lot of it is more about code and then be open about what you're doing. And so we're learning from each other. And then I think we will probably centralize on some best practices. And we already have, there's some things that we've all realized collectively, like this is a good pattern, or and we have like Slack channels where we'll share that kind of information. We have a basic policy around like how to use our own customer data and things like that with AI. Like we have some stuff like that, some guardrails set up. But a lot of the minutia of like, do you use Cursor in this particular way? Do you need to use the Cursor CLI, or do you need to use Opus 4.6? Like those kinds of things are really left up to the individual developer. And as we are open and talk and communicate, I think we help refine each other. But right now it seems a little too early to like require certain things and scope certain things for your developers as far as like that level of detail.
yeah. And to me, like, I don't want to say like there's AI hype and bubble, but I also don't want to say there isn't.
Yeah.
We're still in this discovery phase of trying to figure out
Yeah.
what are the real like ways to use these tools that make us productive. And I think right now there is no like best practice. There's just this exploratory point where you just try to make sense and figure it out. But they do help, right? There's
Yeah.
definitely ways that you use these tools that able to be productive. But I do see that there's this constant battle of companies that push these services to kind of make it seem that in like 6 months from now, this is going to be no need for a developer, and that freaks people out, right? Because it's like, wait,
Yeah.
I'm a developer. What do you mean there's not going to be need for a developer? So I guess from your personal standpoint, like, what are your thoughts on that? And like, are you freaking out? You know what I mean? Like some people are. Like I had people literally call me because I have a YouTube channel where I talk about my journey switching into tech late in life, and people like, there's no point of learning to code. It's a waste of time. Just be a plumber. I'm like, that's opinion. And some people must be getting like these ideas from somewhere. And so like, how do you explain to them, no, it's still like a good idea. Just things may change or shift, but there's still a need. Like, so what are your thoughts, like from a personal perspective of, this crazy times you're living in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think If we go back to why most of us started coding, it wasn't because we loved writing equal open curly bracket or something. It wasn't the syntax. It was the thinking. It was the architecting. It was the way you solve problems. It was the explore, the way we explore our curiosity. It was like this persistence of like, I will find this thing and fix it. All of those things are so alive, more so than ever. And I think a lot of people can have false motives for trying to claim that AI will take away everything. And I think AI will change the industry. We're kind of at this stage of like going between horse and buggy to an automobile. Like we just don't really know what it looks like, and so, and a lot of the patterns that are in place for a world that is kind of fading. So I think it is fair that things are changing a lot, but those fundamental realities, the curiosity, the persistence, the problem solving, asking good questions, architecting stuff, thinking through like implications and how the experiences for an actual developer, like all those things are still in place. And so I think as long as you have that mindset, you are always going to push, like there's always going to be room for developers who think that way. If you were primarily just about getting stuff done and you didn't care about those details, in my mind, a bad developer, maybe you will lose your job. And honestly, like that happens. There's disruption that happens in industries. Obviously, like the caveat for all of this is it's very possible somebody's listening who lost their job and is a great developer. So I'm not suggesting that if you lose your job, you're horrible, but I am suggesting that anyone with that kind of mindset, there's more than enough room right now for people who are saying like, I think this way. AI can empower that in a special way. It can also make you lazy. I had just had a PR I threw in yesterday that I didn't have time to review it. And I said, hey, I'll review this in a second, but it's up. And the person looked at it and said, it doesn't look like you'd even touched this yet. And I hadn't. Like that was a lazy pattern. And so I'm like, okay, I can't do that again. Even though I was going to review it, it can make you lazy. And I think, just like before we had things that drew us away from practicing the best practices as a developer, today is the same thing, except at a higher pace. So I think the mindset of the developer is still very much alive. And because of that, there's a lot of stuff to be solved with that mindset. And if you can wield AI intelligently, then you can do that in a helpful way. So I think I want to choose to be optimistic about AI. Honestly, I like writing syntax. And so I still enjoy doing that. And so maybe it'll be like a hobby, like, people like to knit or, sew or things like that, but you don't have to, but if you want to, you can. And maybe writing syntax will be that. But the thinking of a developer, I think, is very much alive. And if anything, AI just gives that person with that mindset more surface area to cover.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one of the things that I see, like a lot of times people, when they talk about, oh, there's no jobs, and they like, I don't want to say make excuses, like, it's right to freak out. Like when you hear these sensational headlines, Amazon lays off 20 people, and, people make assumptions it's due to AI or whatever, but I'm sure there's other factors, right? Sometimes who knows, right? But to me, like when people give up too quickly, I personally feel like then your heart wasn't in it, like to do the thing that you wanted to do. Because like, to me, like my journey, when I switched to development, like I was actually 35 years old. I'm 45 now. And I started learning at 35, and I didn't get my job until 39. So there's like 4.5 years of self-study, really trying to break into the industry. And I literally played a game with myself where it's like, I'm going to learn these skills. I'm either, at the time, I was really into WordPress. I apologize, PHP. But I was like, I'm either going to learn to build like PHP themes and start my own thing, or I'm going to get hired. And I literally played this game. Am I going to get more successful as a solopreneur or like building PHP themes, or am I going to get a job? And that mindset like ended up having me kind of like get hired with like a marketing agency building PHP themes as a like contractor. And then eventually I got hired as a React developer and doing ESP.NET. I was like, because I kind of was like, I was in it no matter what. And I think, like you said, you would like your brother-in-law said, you're gonna know if you like it or not, because if the bug bites you, you're just gonna do it every waking up of your time. I think that's what it takes. So if you have that curiosity, you have this ability to figure out how things work, like this is the right field for you. And these AI tools are just gonna empower you to do things and explore things much faster and quicker. And I think right now what's happening with this AI as an excuse, like, oh, and maybe we're wrong, maybe AI will replace everybody, but I think that at that point we have to worry about the matrix, But the point is, it's like people who weren't really into it have like a very easy excuse to say why they shouldn't pursue it. Where you talk to like real, like I have a friend, my roommate, he discovered this game Hightail, where you're able to make mods in Java. And because he just loves coding, he loves building things, he just started like doing and building mods and learning Java and I was like, wow, like he didn't ask, oh, AI is gonna not let me do that. It's like, it's the opposite. It's like he was really passionate about doing these things for this, like modding this game, and just out of his excitement, curiosity, he just dove deep, and now I think he's like an expert in Java at this point. But I think the difference is your curiosity to build things, right?
Yeah.
And if you're curious, like this is the right career for you. And if you just want to show up, I don't know, it's the right thing, because I think there's still challenges. And with that being said, I guess like people who are listening to this, they're like, okay, I really want to get into development. I really want to do this. What do you think? Where should they be spending learning their like time learning? What things should they focus on? Because some of these tools make it a little bit easier to skip some of the learning and just get to producing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, at first, I guess, let me just say, like, obviously we're speaking in generalities, and like, it's
Yeah.
very possible that a specific person like fits a mold where they're a hard worker, all this stuff, they just can't find a job. So like, I know Paul and I both are not saying like, well, if you can't get a job, it means you're lazy and don't care. You know,
No,
I
that's
do
definitely
think,
not it. The market is hard. I'm
yeah,
not gonna beat around the bush. It is tough, but it's not
yeah.
impossible.
But I do think that there's this fundamental drive to somebody that we're both describing that is true of developers, and it would be true of you if you're in that spot. And this drive to figure out stuff, to be curious, to solve problems, to architect stuff. So all those things are alive. And I think if you're learning, I would focus personally, like there's kind of this balance you always have to have when you're learning something. If you kind of go so slow and fundamental that you're never really doing the thing, and like, let's take basketball as an example. Let's say you're learning basketball and you spend all your time just dribbling and perfecting your dribbling, but you're never actually playing a game. You might be a really good dribbler. You could even be good at basketball, but you won't really like, you're not going to get the joy out of that. And I think a lot of times there was this take in the past where it was like you had to be so focused on fundamentals that you never built anything. It was all just like, let me go understand this API in JavaScript and let me go understand this. So there's always been a balance between like building something that's actionable and like, oh, that was cool. That obviously isn't perfect, but it's at my skill level, what I could do, and learning the fundamentals. And I think AI, what it allows you to do is to skip past a lot of the fundamentals and get straight to building. In that sense, I think it's actually super empowering for people who are first picking it up, because it allows you to say immediately, oh, I did something. Now, the problem is if you stop there, building something and getting that kind of high off building something is super cool. But then you really need to go back and say, why does it work that way? How did it work? What could I have used instead? And honestly, the best tool you have right now is sitting in front of you where you can ask it questions. It'll never get tired of you, and it'll give you other alternatives. And so to say like, okay, I built this app. Let me now go backwards and break it down. Why did we use this API? What are the other options? Why are we using this framework? Why did we use this CSS here? Are there other ways I could have architected this? Like, those are all questions you should be asking. And then if it mentions something you don't know, you can say, okay, I didn't understand what this particular, like, I didn't know what the internationalization API was in JavaScript. Okay, what is this? Let me go open MDM. I'm going to scroll through this, try to understand it. Maybe you can ask AI, what are the key things I need to understand about this? When would I use it versus not? Like those questions, that's how a developer thinks. And I think as long as you're asking those kinds of questions, I would go between building stuff and getting excited about that, and then breaking that down backwards and saying, okay, now why did that work that way? What were the other options I could have chosen? And then really understanding the fundamentals. And then you build upon that and you build the next thing. And the next time you have opinions about things. And now it's building things, or you're building things, and it suggest something that you don't think is the right thing now, and you have those opinions, and having those opinions came from real experience like that. So I think as a beginner developer, that is the first thing I'd say is like, make sure that you get the excitement out of building stuff. Don't just be so focused on like fundamentals are all that matters that you don't get the excitement of it, but don't get sucked up in the excitement where you can today. Really, with AI, you can very quickly build things that you don't understand, break those back down, understand the details, and then build the next thing. So I guess as a whole, I'd say then understand the fundamentals, enjoy building things, break it back down and understand the fundamentals, enjoy building things, and kind of go back and forth like that. But it's the thinking, it's the architecting, it's all those questions that are the most important. And I think what's become less important has been syntax. That's not saying that syntax is unimportant. A lot of design and architecting decisions are about syntax. But ultimately you need to understand the fundamentals through building. And in that way, it's like it's always been. Like this is what we always had to do. It just was Stack Overflow instead of AI. But you
Yes.
could be lazy and just copy code blocks. And now you could be lazy and just copy whatever your AI says. But a genuine developer is going to keep going back. Why does it work this way? What are the options I could have chosen instead? Why was this one the one we chose? Is this the right option? What are the trade-offs? Like all those questions. If you ask those things and you build in this kind of pattern back and forth, I think you'll find like the kind of joy that developers have always had.
Yeah, and to me, like I agree with you like 100% with everything you said. It's like literally amazing and refreshing to hear somebody else like share the opinions. I think like developers do share all those opinions, and I think sometimes you get caught up in like the Twitter. And it's like my AI agent built me $1 million business, and now I have a Bugatti. But it's like there's a difference between like you really like loving the craft of like the field, and you have this curiosity to learn how things work under the hood that will continue to fuel your knowledge and make you more productive with AI tools. And one of the interesting things, like I think of it like it's being like a pilot, right? Airplanes practically fly themselves, right? But a pilot still needs to be there to know exactly, what to do and have the experience if things go awry or wrong. And I feel like the same thing with like AI. It's like we still need to deeply understand, or at least have the curiosity to do that, to build things. Because I love like I don't like saying vibe coding, but I said because it triggers some people. But like I love building apps, just like really quickly, and just seeing like the progress you make, and then getting to a point where I'm like, I don't have an idea what the hell this code does, and then backtracking and going through every line and removing pieces, putting them back together, and trying to get an understanding of what things are. And I get to a point where like I don't mind like the fact that I use AI like to write code, because if a friend asks me about that code base, I should be able to explain it myself. And if I
Yeah.
can't, that means I messed up somewhere. There's something like I
Yeah.
didn't do right. I didn't
You weren't a
do the
developer.
due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you were mentioning to a point, like anybody new learning, you have, like you said, you have ChatGPT, you have these AI models to literally ask questions. They don't get tired of you. And so I actually built a little sub agent in Claude with this little skill file that kind of describes how I want to be tutored. And so the idea, it's like when I spin it up, it will never tell me the answer, but it'll ask me questions like, hey, do you know how this works or why this works? And then I'll give it an answer. And it's like, you're not quite right. And then they'll tell me, think about it this way. So it never gives me the answer, but it gives me just a little nudge to figure out the answer myself. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind. If you're using these tools, it's very easy to get the answer, but I think you should kind of give yourself space to be like, let me try to figure this out on my own. And I think that is a great way to think about it.
Yeah, if I could tie some of this back into the DevTools kind of discussion and DX discussion as well, I think just by nature of the way of what these tools are, they were trained on the medium knowledge. And so like that doesn't mean that they have useless information, but if there's a bell curve, like they have the central information, but there's expert information over here. And like you only get to that by asking those kinds of questions. You're usually not going to get prompted that way. And I think as like a DevTools company, what we're trying to say is like, how can we make the experience better than the average? You can just ask Claude like, hey, use Resend. And it can just generally scrape from the internet and try to pull the medium knowledge. But as a DevTools company, what we're saying is AX, good agent experience, is saying like, let's go to the expert side of that bell curve. How can we give agents that opinion? And ultimately, whether you're building yourself or you're building a tools company like Resend is, what you want to do is ask that, how do we move beyond the medium knowledge? And whether that's individuals, the way they would use it, whether that's agents, the way they would use it, how can we provide expertise in an area that frankly, a lot of people shouldn't have to care about? They just want it to work, but you want to provide that knowledge in a way that's digestible, that's helpful, that's easy to grok. So that's everything from like your docs are the product. Like if your docs are not good and they don't guide people well, then it doesn't matter how good the product is. Considering all types of users, all levels of users, all humanities of users, human and robots, or whatever, being like adding like progressive disclosure to things. So you're not just dumping information, you're providing the best information first and allowing them to expand on their knowledge when they're ready for it. The importance of like search engine optimization and agent optimization, like realizing that noise about your product doesn't necessarily, or about your docs doesn't necessarily mean the docs are wrong. Maybe the product isn't intuitive and like maybe you need to take it back that way. So anything we can do to move past the medium kind of central knowledge that these models have been trained on or that people would generally find on the internet, that's what we're trying to ask in this age of DX is like, how can we get expert knowledge? How can we get opinionated views on how things should be done? And then communicate that in a way that's easy to understand, that gives you a really quick time to action, gives you a really quick time to debug with knowledgeable, actionable insight if you mess up. All of that is what we try to do with DX, is push beyond the medium and go to the expert in a way that's digestible for people.
Yeah, and that's well said. And I think the word I'm going to say you coined it, give you all the credit to you, agentic experience, AX. I think there is the next like kind of evolution is, you want your docs, your product, and the way people engage with your content also to be available to these agentic flows that folks like to use. And so now when you're thinking of making documentation or making content, it's like, it's not just humans going to consume this, but people are going to use their agents to consume it. And I'm finding like Tanstack is like a really good example of kind of also doing the same thing where they're trying to make sure that people who use agents to build, with their framework have the easiest possible way to build stuff because they provided all the, appropriate resources to work well in the agentic flow. This is something like we are doing in Strapi too, and starting to think more and more about is how can we make, our product, not just how people interact with it, but accessible to agents, not through just building it, but also using it. And I think that's like a good shift for anybody to keep in mind when you're building products for the future. So I don't know, like, I don't want to go too long. So if anybody has questions in the chat, let us know. And if you have anything to add, Chris, let us know. But while folks are thinking of questions, I do want to showcase this little Strapi application I built because, like, first of all, the funny part about like this whole, let me just like share my screen here. Let me click the right buttons. The funny part, I was like, I'm going to build a little example project, how to set Resend up. And I thought this is going to be like this thing. It's going to take me some time. There's these things I'm going to navigate. I literally went to your website, got the API key, and then Strapi has the email provider. I just installed it, 3 steps, took me 5 minutes, and I was done.
Perfect.
And I was like, wait, that was like too easy, too simple. So obviously I was like, well, I can't have like 10 minutes of a talk on how easy it is to set up Resend and use it. So I was like, you know what? Let me make a ridiculous example how you could send emails with Resend. I apologize. I have to replace that avatar. So I have this AI chat made via plugin in Strapi, and I could say, can you send emails? Let me just ask. I'm not up. I got to refresh the screen because I just restarted the server. But can you send emails? And my assistant here, she has ability and access to tool calls. Don't mind what she says, whatever, it's fine. So she says, yes, I could send emails. She remembers my email because, that's how smart she is. And so I could say, can you write a poem about cats and send it to me?
The important
and hopefully that's what's going to happen. So she already has like the recipient, the subject, and content. And I do have to confirm because I didn't want my agent to just randomly send emails. So you have to say, yes, send email. And then she will go ahead and send the email. So you could see success true. And if I go to my mailbox, a special cat poem just for you. And so, ridiculous example, is this how you should be using emails from Resend? But the point that I was going to make, it's like, it took me 2 minutes to set up Resend And literally I had all this time in my head to come up with the most ridiculous example that I could share with our community of how to send emails. And so here you are. I have a, chat bot that has access to tools. And what's cool in Strapi, like you could actually define how to send emails programmatically. And so if anybody's interested, I could share the repo to my little side project here. But basically, we are able to hook into Strapi's plugin email service, and you could easily send emails programmatically. So if you have a special use case, or let's say you update content and you want to have that updated content email to someone, you could have all these different triggers that trigger different emails. But I just wanted to kind of share that because I thought it's like Resend was too easy to set up. Let me create the most ridiculous way that people probably don't want to know about how to send emails in Strapi. But again, leveraging AI and agentic flow, giving tools to make that happen. But I don't know. I don't know if it was the best example, but I was pretty proud of it. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I think the important thing is that it freed you up to build. And that's what we want to do. We want to free people up to build. And whether that's a fun side project, which honestly, like that's a lot of what keeps me going as a dev, is the fun, silly side projects. Like that's what makes a lot of this fun, is I can build stuff. Or whether it's, a full product. I think like a lot of like what I've been thinking about around DX and around development as a whole in this kind of AI era is like, what a cool time to be alive. I think I was talking to a friend who does a lot of woodwork, and he was saying like, I wish I had these machines and I just don't have them. So it's really hard to do the stuff I want to do. And I said, well, that's actually why I love development. Like imagine somebody gave you a machine shop, wood shop that had every tool you could ever want, all, the different types of wood that you could ever want to use. All you were limited by was your time and your creativity. That's what it means to be a developer. You can do anything. And I think that's what we're trying to do at Resend, is empower people to build whatever they want to and whatever flows that they want to, whether they're using agents or not, whether they're reading the docs manually, whether they're having an agent do that. We want to make it to where you can do that. You can live in that world and create whatever you want and use Resend without having like a bunch of mental overload of having to understand how everything works in a complex flow. And we can kind of give you what you need when you need it at the right time, progressively disclosing those things. And that's what it's like to build today. And in a sense, it's always been that way, but we've just now expanded it to more people through AI. And obviously there's a lot of dangers and pitfalls, but we're so early in a lot of this. I think we'd be foolish to kind of sign on or off the AI train right now. Really what we're trying to do is to say, however you like to build, we want to make it where Resend is a place you feel at home. And it's the easiest place to build. We understand you, we think like you, and we empower you. And so I think I choose to be optimistic in this age and try to empower people however they like to build.
Yeah, and it's amazing, like, the whole idea of DX, AX, and making your product as easy to consume and start using right away. Because what interesting thing happened to me when I first set up this provider, and the fact that it took me 2 minutes, I didn't have a thought of like, okay, I have to figure this out. I have to troubleshoot this. How does this work? I literally started having 1,000 different ideas how I could use your service to create something useful. And I was like I showed like a very like crazy fun example.
Sure.
But I was like, you could literally make a whole email suite powered by Resend and Strapi with some of these AI automated things that could make it easier for you to draft emails, to do things. And I'm thinking of all these cool solutions that customers may enjoy, rather than trying to wrestle with like, how do you set this thing up so I could start using it. And I love the fact that, AI, like it literally empowers folks to focus more on building rather than trying to troubleshoot issues that stop us ultimately from creating solutions that help our clients, or cool apps to share with folks, or whatever your imagination desires. You can now focus on building that vision and bringing it to the market and trying it out. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah, and if you're building a dev tool or you're kind of in this space, I would encourage you, like, just start from scratch, try to throw all your knowledge out and like sign up for your own service. Go through the flow. Like, how easy is it? Does it make sense? Do you need special knowledge? Come up with a couple of realistic examples of what your customers struggle with, and your success team can give you that. Here's stuff that people get stuck on, and then come up with a scenario, try to solve it without any expert knowledge. Solve it like they would. Search Google, ask ChatGPT. Like, are you finding the answers quickly? Those are the kinds of things we're constantly repping at Resend. But I think it's so important in this age to really do the work and not just guess at what would work well. You've got to actually go through this flow again and again and again. You've got to sign up for your own service over and over again. Try new flows from a beginner standpoint over and over again. And the more we can think that way, we really help real people to kind of come back to an earlier theme by respecting their time, by respecting who they are, and making it easy for them to get what they want done.
Yeah, and that was so beautifully said. I think like I don't have anything to add. I love to talk, and I could probably come up with something, but no, it was very well said. So let's do some questions for the last 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
And if folks don't have questions, that's perfectly fine. In the meantime, you can always where could they find you, Chris? By the way, if people want to follow up or follow you.
You can find me on our website. If you just go to, you can go to our blog and check out the latest post I did, and there's a link in my name at the top there, and it gives access to all my social stuff. So that's probably the easiest thing to track me down, so I don't have to give you all those. I'm also at chrispennington.dev, and again, links to all my socials and stuff there. I'm always happy to interact with people. I do see one question here about SEO for agents, so I'm happy to answer that to the best of my knowledge. I think the whole agentic, like SEO, whatever that's called, I think I've heard it called GEO, AEO, a bunch of different things, is still obviously something we're trying to experiment with and understand how they best understand it. Generally speaking, it's kind of like accessibility. The thing that's best for people is going to be best for everyone. So like you should have ARIA labels on stuff when it needs it. Use the right semantic HTML. Like all those kinds of things apply as well when it comes to AEO. There's obviously extra things like lms.txt seems to be something that's important. It certainly seems like FAQ pages or pages that have lots of question answers are helpful. If you have good indexing, so like good sitemaps, good JSON LD, like a lot of the fundamentals that people kind of skip over have always been important, and they continue to be important. So I think that's really what we're trying to do, is say, like, do we have pages for everything? Do we have landing pages that explain content well, that tells a good story? Is it have good, it does have good alt text for all the images? Are the headers properly aligned, like 1H1? And like a lot of that kind of stuff, the fundamental stuff, it seems to be is still very, very important. I think the only extra things we found currently, at least it seems to be very helpful to have lms.txt, especially for your documentation. It also seems to be very helpful to have like JSON LD, which again, you should have had anyhow, but a lot of people haven't. And so I think it's becoming more important because it's structured data about a certain page. And it seems to be very important to have FAQ sections. Even like blog posts that are more comparisons, that list off details about competitors or those kinds of things, seem to really do well with LMs as well. And then ultimately, like, to have a good experience when people start to use your stuff helps as well, because I think that feedback, somehow the majority of opinion does seem to impact the way these LMs are trained as well. But those are at least some of the things we've seen and how we've kind of tried to be doubling down on them. If you have tools around agents as well, like MCPs and agent skills and things like that, it also seems to make you more agent friendly to the LMs as well. But again, I think the space is moving a lot. So maybe sticking to those fundamentals with a couple of those extras seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, and I concur. It's similar things we're doing at Strappy, and like those things that were good SEO practice, from before, still apply with these minor tweaks that you mentioned. And we also started like that FAQ seems to be like a big one now too. We started implementing that as well. Pretty awesome. Yeah, and the folks in the chat, don't be shy to ask questions. We definitely don't mind them. But otherwise, we'll could close the stream, because I think we have a lot of great topics covered. And if you join late, don't worry, this is going to be on YouTube. You'll be able to rewatch. I think Chris shared a lot of stuff on DX, AX, thoughts on the current landscape of AI and development and what it means. A lot of great topics. I actually learned a lot as well. And so that was really
Yeah.
a pleasure of having you here.
Well, thanks so much. If I can make kind of a final appeal, especially to anyone who's a Resend user, we're very serious when I say this, that we want to hear your opinions on stuff. Like we want to hear like this wasn't smooth, this didn't make sense. Those are the kinds of things that like we really, I mean, that's gold for us. And so if you can reach out to me, I'd love to hear your opinions on stuff. If you try a new workflow and you say this didn't really make sense, I didn't understand the docs here, like that kind of stuff is what I lived for, because what I want to do is make it so where it's as easy as possible for you. And so just my appeal that really genuinely reach out. We believe like support is part of DX too. Like if you reach out, you should hear a real human interact with you quickly. And so we take that really seriously as well. And that goes for us individually as well. So I'd love to hear from people. Reach out to me on socials, email, whatever mechanism works best for you. And ultimately, like I want to empower you to build more. And that's what's going to make this developer journey exciting for all of us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Chris. And thank you all for joining. It was a lot of fun. I hope you found this chat very insightful, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Paul. Bye.
Bye.